Are you ready to uncover one of the most shocking mysteries of the modern age? The story you're about to hear will twist everything you thought you knew about the world we live in. This is not some fictional tale, nor is it a product of wild imagination. What we're diving into today is a real, unfolding mystery that's about to shatter the boundaries of identity, trust, and what it means to be human. A man, who appears to be something out of a superhero movie, has been living among us, deceiving even the sharpest minds. But what if I told you that everything about him, his identity, his power, his very existence, is a lie? You came here for answers, and I promise you by the end of this video, you'll have them. Stick with me, because I'm going to guide you through this labyrinth of truth and deception, and what we uncover will blow your mind. You might think you know who he is based on the headlines and the rumors floating around. Someone who's been called a genius, a revolutionary, and even a savior of our times. But behind the dazzling facade, behind the so-called accomplishments, lies a mystery so deep, it will make you question everything you've been told. You're probably thinking right now, how could this be real? How could someone fool an entire world into believing there's something they're not? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get to the bottom of. This video isn't just about peeling back the layers of a single person's life. It's about understanding the dangerous game of illusion we're all caught in, a game where reality bends, and we all have to decide what to believe. In the next few minutes, we'll take a journey together, step by step, through his rise to fame, the secrets he's desperately tried to keep hidden, and the dark truth behind his meteoric success. There's a man at the center of this. But trust me, the story goes much deeper than his name. We're talking about how a carefully constructed identity can change the course of history. And while I can't promise it will be easy to hear, I can promise that you will not walk away unchanged. You will never look at the world or the people you trust in the same way again. So let's dig in, because this story is about to get wild. What do you do when everything you thought you knew about someone turns out to be nothing but a carefully crafted illusion? Think about it for a second. What if everything you've been told about this person, their background, their abilities, their very identity, was built on lies? The man at the heart of this mystery isn't who he says he is. Not even close. But how can someone with so much influence, so much power, pull this off without anyone noticing? And why? What's the end game here? Why would anyone go to such extreme lengths to create a fake identity, one so convincing that even the smartest, most cautious people in the world bought into it? Now, here's the thing. We're not talking about some small-time trickster who pulled off a harmless ruse. We're talking about someone who has managed to manipulate entire systems, get into the highest circles of power, and become a hero to millions, all while hiding behind a mask. His name, well, I can't give that to you just yet, but trust me, you'll know it by the end of this video. His story is so compelling that it has the world on the edge of its seat, and as we peel back the layers, you're going to see a very different side of him. The real question is, what happens when a mask comes off, and the world is forced to confront the truth? As we get into this, I need you to keep an open mind, because what we're about to reveal doesn't just challenge your perception of this one person. It will challenge your view of reality itself. We're diving into deception on a level you've never seen before, and by the end, you might even find yourself asking, how did I not see this coming? It's easy to dismiss things when they don't fit into the neat little boxes we've been taught to put them in. But I'm asking you to take that leap of faith with me. We're going to uncover the truth behind this mystery, and I need you to stay with me until the very end. Because trust me, you're not going to want to miss what's coming next. The deeper we go into this story, the more you'll realize how deep the rabbit hole really is. But don't worry, you're not alone on this journey. We're in this together. You might feel a little uncomfortable. After all, when you're faced with truth that shakes the foundation of everything you know, it can feel like the world around you is crumbling. But I promise, you'll be glad you stuck around. You came here for answers, and that's exactly what we're going to get. By the end of this video, the mystery will be solved, and the shocking truth about this so-called superhuman will be laid bare. So here's your chance to decide. Are you going to sit back and watch as this story unfolds? Or are you going to dive in with me, uncover the truth, and see just how deep this conspiracy really goes? Don't blink. Don't look away. This is one story you won't want to miss. Now, let's go deeper into the life of a man who fooled us all, because the truth, my friend, is stranger than fiction. But here's the twist. Are you ready to know what's been hidden from you all along? Keep watching. You won't believe where this journey will take us next. The story you're about to hear goes beyond simple deception. It's not just about a man pulling off an incredible ruse. It's about an entire system being manipulated, lives being altered, and trust being shattered. As we dig deeper into the life of the so-called superhuman, we start to uncover a far more complex web of lies and deceit. At first, it might seem like a simple case of someone wearing a mask, pretending to be something they're not. But as the layers peel away, it becomes clear that there is much more play. The stakes are higher than any of us imagined, and every twist in the story leaves us with more questions and answers. Who is this man really? What does he want? And, most importantly, how far would he go to keep his secrets hidden? In the beginning, it was easy to believe the story that was sold to public. The world was desperate for a hero, and here he was, a man who seemed to possess abilities beyond the ordinary. His rise to fame was swift and dramatic, with the media hailing him as a once-in-a-lifetime genius, someone who could change the course of history. His achievements seemed to pile up faster than anyone could keep track of. Every project he touched turned into gold. From groundbreaking scientific discoveries to technological advancements, his name became synonymous with success. But what nobody could see, what the public failed to notice, was that everything he did was built on a foundation of lies. Beneath the surface of his accolades, something darker was simmering. It was as if this man was always 2 steps ahead of everyone around him, always managing to avoid the truth from catching up with him. The more people admired him, the more he seemed to push his own identity further into the background, becoming less of a person and more of a symbol. But there was one person who was determined to dig deeper, a person who had noticed something strange about him from the very beginning. This person had followed his rise, kept track of his movements, and observed his every move with an unsettling level of scrutiny. They weren't fooled by the polished image the world had come to know. They saw the cracks, the inconsistencies, the things that didn't add up, and as they delved further, they began to uncover something terrifying. The deeper they went into this man's history, the more they realized that there was nothing real about him. Every story he told, every achievement he claimed to have made, was fabricated. The man, known to the world as a visionary and genius, had no true past. His childhood, a mystery. His education, an enigma. His career, a fabrication. Everything about him had been manufactured to fit the narrative he wanted the world to believe. But why go to such lengths to create an entirely fake persona? What was the end goal? And who was really behind all of this? As the investigation into his past continued, it became clear that there were others involved in the creation of this false identity. People who had helped craft his story, who had covered up his tracks, and who had kept him hidden from prying eyes. But what was even more chilling was the realization that these people weren't just helping him. They were manipulating everyone around them. This wasn't just one person pulling the strings. It was a network of individuals, each with their own reasons for supporting the charade. The more the investigator uncovered, the more they realized that this conspiracy stretched far beyond the man at the center of it all. There were powerful forces at play, each one determined to keep the truth buried. And then there was the question that lingered in the back of everyone's mind. What if this wasn't just about a fake identity? What if the man himself wasn't even human? Could it be possible that everything about him, his abilities, his accomplishments, his persona, was part of a larger, more terrifying plan? Was he a pawn in something far more sinister? Or was he the mastermind behind it all? Every answer seemed to raise more questions, and every discovery only made the mystery more complex. As the investigator dug deeper, they started to notice something disturbing. People who had been close to this man, those who had worked with him, supported him, and even admired him, were beginning to disappear. It was subtle at first, just a few people here and there, but as time went on, the disappearances became more frequent. The closer anyone got to uncovering the truth, the more dangerous it seemed to become. It was as if someone or something was actively trying to prevent anyone from exposing the man's real identity. Whoever was behind this conspiracy was willing to go to extreme lengths to keep the truth buried, but the investigator couldn't stop. They couldn't turn back now. They had come too far, and the stakes were too high. As they dug deeper, they started to uncover a trail of destruction that stretched across continents and industries. People's lives have been ruined, companies have been sabotaged, and entire systems have been manipulated, all in the name of keeping this one man's secret hidden. The world had been deceived, and the price of that deception was about to be paid. The more the investigator uncovered, the more they realized that they weren't just dealing with a man who had created a fake identity. They were dealing with a global conspiracy that had infiltrated the very systems of power and influence. Governments, corporations, and powerful individuals had all played a part in covering up the truth. But why? What was the ultimate goal of this elaborate scheme? What was this man really after, and what was his role in the grander scheme of things? As the investigation reached its climax, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The man wasn't just a fraud. He was a key player in a much larger game, one that had been unfolding in the shadows for years. The world had been blind to the forces that had been shaping their reality, and now it was time to wake up to the truth. But just as the investigator was on the verge of uncovering the final piece of the puzzle, something unexpected happened. The man, the so-called superhuman, disappeared. One moment, he was there, and the next, he was gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing behind but a trail of broken lives and shattered illusions. The investigation was left unfinished, the answers still out of reach. The mystery of the man's true identity remained unsolved, and the world was left to grapple with the unsettling reality that everything they thought they knew might be nothing but a lie. As the story comes to a close, the questions still linger. Who was he really? What was his true purpose? And what is the price of believing in something or someone who isn't what they seem? The answers are out there, but whether we'll ever find them is another question entirely. What we do know for sure is this: the world is not what it seems, and the search for the truth is far from over. There are still many more layers to peel back, many more secrets to uncover. And as for the man at the center of this mystery, he's still out there, somewhere, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The truth may be closer than we think, but it's also more elusive than we could have ever imagined. Will we ever get the answers we seek? Only time will tell. The mystery surrounding the man had grown even more dangerous, like a shadow creeping closer with every passing day. The investigator, who had been relentlessly pursuing answers, was now facing a terrifying realization. The deeper they dug, the more they saw how vast and intricate the network around the man truly was. What began as a simple quest for truth had now turned into a life-or-death race, with the forces keeping the man's secret hidden growing more powerful and desperate by the hour. Every person the investigator reached out to seemed to disappear the moment they became involved, leaving behind nothing but cryptic warnings or incomplete fragments of truth. It was as if the world itself had been carefully constructed to protect this man's secret, and anyone who ventured too close was bound to be erased. But just as the investigator was beginning to lose hope, they received an unexpected lead. A name, a simple, cryptic message appeared in their inbox, sent from an anonymous source, hinting at a key player in the entire operation. The message was short and to the point: find the architect. Nothing more. The investigator knew they had to act fast, but this lead was just the beginning of a new chapter in their search for the truth. The more the investigator tried to follow this trail, the more they discovered how deep the conspiracy went. It wasn't just about the man and his false identity anymore. The architect, as the message had suggested, was a shadowy figure who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. As they worked their way through layers of encrypted data, hidden files, and off-the-record conversations, the investigator began to uncover something more chilling. The architect wasn't just manipulating the world for money or power. No, the architect had a far more insidious plan in mind, one that involved the entire human race. This was no ordinary conspiracy. This was a game for control over the very fabric of society itself. As the investigator connected the dots, they realized that the architect had been using the man, the so-called superhuman, as a pawn in a much larger experiment, one that had begun long before the man's public rise to fame. The man's abilities as genius and his extraordinary feats weren't natural. They had been engineered. The world had witnessed his accomplishments, marveled at his talents, but they hadn't seen what was happening behind the curtain. What they didn't know was that the man was not a product of pure brilliance. He was a result of years of research, of genetic manipulation, of an experiment designed to create something or someone beyond human limits. The true purpose of the man's creation was not to serve humanity, but to control it, to shape it in the architect's vision. And the twist, the one piece of information that sent shockwaves through the investigator's mind, was this. The architect wasn't working alone. There was an entire network of powerful individuals, companies, and governments who had been complicit in the creation of the superhuman. This wasn't just about one man's fake identity. It was about a global-scale manipulation, one that had infiltrated every major institution and led to the birth of a new kind of control. The architect's plan had been to slowly condition the world to accept a new reality, one where this man, this engineered superhuman, would be the key to molding society into something that could be controlled and manipulated with ease. As the investigators' discoveries grew more disturbing, they began to feel the weight of the truth pressing down on them. They were no longer just uncovering the secrets of a single individual. They were exposing an entire system that had been set in motion years ago, one that had created a false narrative and a fake hero to deceive the masses. The architect had planted seeds in every corner of the world, and now those seeds were beginning to bloom into a dangerous new reality. And worse, the investigator realized that they were not the only ones searching for answers. Others had already caught wind of conspiracy, and they were willing to go to any lengths to keep the truth buried. The investigator had barely begun to process the enormity of their findings when they were ambushed. A sudden blackout. A set of men in suits, cold, calculated, and efficient, had arrived, determined to silence them once and for all. The investigator barely managed to escape, running through the streets in the dead of night, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They knew they were being hunted. The architect and their associates were closing in fast, and the investigation had reached a point of no return. With nowhere left to hide, the investigators sought out the few remaining allies they could trust, hoping to continue the pursuit of truth while staying one step ahead of the enemies who had marked them for death. As the chase intensified, the investigator began to piece together the final fragments of the puzzle. The so-called superhuman had been created as a weapon designed not just to perform incredible feats of genius, but to inspire the world's faith in an entirely new order. The architect had foreseen the public's desperate need for a savior, and they had crafted this man as the perfect hero. But it was all a lie. The public was merely a pawn in a game that had been played for years. The man's extraordinary abilities weren't the result of hard work or genius. They were the result of a calculated experiment, an attempt to bend the human mind to the will of the architect. The deeper the investigator went, the more disturbing the picture became. This wasn't just a personal vendetta or an attempt to pull off a big con. This was about altering the course of human history. The superhuman wasn't just a fake identity. He was a symbol, a harbinger of a future controlled by those who could manipulate reality itself. The architect's plan was simple. Create the illusion of a perfect leader, a flawless hero who would inspire trust and admiration, and in doing so, gain the power to shape society to their own desires. The architect had created a figure who could never be questioned, whose actions could never be doubted. In doing so, they had set in motion a new form of control, one that could be used to crush any opposition and eliminate any resistance to their vision of the world. But even as the investigator closed on the truth, they couldn't help but wonder, was the superhuman aware of the role he was playing in this grand design? Or was he, too, just a pawn in a game that he didn't fully understand? The lines between hero and villain had become blurred. The more the investigator learned, the less they were sure of. Was the man truly the mastermind behind this plan? Or was he simply another victim of a far more dangerous conspiracy? The story wasn't over yet. As the investigator raced against time to expose the architect's plan and bring the truth to light, they knew that they were walking a fine line. Every step forward brought them closer to the truth, but it also brought them closer to danger. And as the twists and turns of the investigation reached a fever pitch, the one question that lingered in the investigator's mind was this: how far would the architect go to protect their secret? And when the truth finally came to light, would the world be ready to accept it, or would it crumble under the weight of revelation too horrifying to comprehend? The stakes had never been higher. The final confrontation between the investigator and the architect loomed on the horizon, but neither side could predict what would happen when they finally came face to face with the truth. Would the architect's master plan be revealed, or would it be buried forever, hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of lies? The answers were just out of reach, but one thing was certain. Everything had led to this moment. The world was about to learn the shocking truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The tension in the air was thick, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The investigator had gathered every shred of evidence they could find, and the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. The architect, the puppet master pulling all the strings from the shadows, had no intention of allowing the investigator to uncover the full scope of their plan. But this time, the investigator wasn't backing down. They had come too far, and the truth was too important to ignore. As they moved closer to the final confrontation, they realized just how deeply entrenched conspiracy was in every level of society: government, business, technology, even the media. The superhuman was not just a creation of the architect, but a symbol of their power, a figurehead who represented everything they wanted the world to believe in. They had engineered him to be the perfect hero, someone who could do no wrong, someone who was above reproach, and it had worked. The public adored him, worshipped him even, without understanding the darkness that lay beneath the surface. In the days leading up to the confrontation, the investigator's life had become a constant game of cat and mouse. They were being tracked, hunted by forces they couldn't even begin to understand. Yet, despite the danger, the investigator pressed on. They had no choice. Every clue they unearthed, every piece of the puzzle they fit together, only confirmed what they had feared. The architect's plans were far more sinister than they had imagined. The superhuman wasn't just a figurehead, a puppet for the architect's scheme. He was the embodiment of the architect's ultimate goal. The world was being prepared for a new era, one where the boundaries of human potential were rewritten, where a select few would control not just the fate of nations, but the very destiny of humanity itself. But just as the investigator thought they were on the brink of uncovering the final piece of the puzzle, everything changed. It was late at night when the investigator received a phone call. The voice on the other end was cold, emotionless, but it was unmistakably familiar. It was the superhuman himself. For the first time, he was reaching out, not as a hero the world knew, but as a man seeking answers of his own. He had been watching the investigator's every move, and now, for reasons unknown, he was willing to meet. The meeting was set for midnight, in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The investigator's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. This was it, the moment that could change everything. But deep down, they knew that no matter what happened next, they were walking into the lion's den. The investigator arrived at the warehouse, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The only light came from a single bulb hanging overhead, casting long shadows on the concrete floor. And then, from the darkness, the superhuman emerged. He looked the same as ever, immaculate, confident, almost godlike, but there was something different about him. The usual sense of invulnerability, of being above the law, seemed to have faded. There was a quiet desperation in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that made the investigator question everything they thought they knew. The man who had been the perfect hero, the one who could do no wrong, was now standing before them, human and flawed. The illusion was starting to crack. The investigator didn't waste time with pleasantries. They came straight to the point, demanding answers. Why had he been created? Why had he allowed himself to be a puppet in the architect's game? What was the architect's ultimate plan? The superhuman remained silent for a long moment, his eyes locked on the investigators with an intensity that felt almost painful. And then, finally, he spoke. His voice was strained, as if every word weighed heavily on him. He confessed that he had known from the beginning that his identity was fake, that his accomplishments had been engineered, and that his entire life had been scripted by the architect. But what he had never known was the true purpose behind it all. He had been told he was a savior, the hero who would lead humanity to a better future. But as time went on, doubts began to creep in. He started to question the architect's motives, and when he realized the full extent of the manipulation, it was too late. He had become a symbol, a god in the eyes of the world, but in truth, he was nothing more than a a weapon designed to control the masses. For a moment, the investigator and the superhuman stood in silence, each coming to terms with the truth in their own way. The investigator had expected anger, resentment, maybe even a sense of betrayal. But what they saw in the superhuman's eyes was something far more unsettling: regret. The weight of his existence. The burden of knowing that he'd been a part of something far darker than he'd ever imagined was taking its toll. He wasn't the hero the world thought he was, and he knew it. In that moment, the investigator realized that they weren't the only one trapped in a web of lies. The superhuman had been just as much a victim as anyone else. The two of them spent hours talking, uncovering the final pieces of the puzzle. The architect's plan was revealed in its entirety. It wasn't just about creating the perfect hero. It was about controlling the future, bending society to their will by manipulating the perception of reality. The architect had created a false narrative, one where the superhuman was the key to humanity's salvation. But that salvation came with a price that would be paid by everyone except the architect and their inner circle. The superhuman had been the instrument, the face of the lie, and now, with the architect's true intentions exposed, there was no turning back. As the conversation drew to a close, the superhuman made a choice. He would help the investigator bring the architect's plan to light. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without consequences, but it was the only way to atone for the role he had played in the architect's scheme. The two of them would work together, using the evidence they had gathered to expose the truth to the world. It wouldn't be a simple task. The architect's network was vast, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secret. But the superhuman had something the architect didn't: knowledge of the system, insight into the inner workings of the conspiracy. Together, they would bring it all crashing down. The final showdown came quickly. Armed with the evidence they needed, the investigator and the superhuman confronted the architect in a daring attempt to bring their plan to an end. The confrontation was intense, with twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. In the end, it was the investigator's unwavering determination and the superhuman's knowledge of the architect's inner workings that tipped the scales in their favor. The architect was finally exposed, their network dismantled, and their plans for global control unraveled. But the victory came at a cost. The superhuman, despite his role in the architect's scheme, had come to realize that the world needed him, not as a false savior, but as a real person, someone who could make a difference without being manipulated. His journey was one of redemption, of finding his true identity after years of living a lie. As the dust settled and the world began to process the shocking revelations, the superhuman walked away from the life he had known, choosing instead to build a future on his own terms. The investigator, too, found peace, knowing that the truth had been revealed and justice had been served. The world was forever changed by the events that had unfolded, but there was hope now. A hope that the lies that had shaped so much of their reality could finally be put to rest. And as the story came to an end, the investigator and the superhuman parted ways, knowing that their lives would never be the same. The architect's legacy had been destroyed, but the world was still left with a question. What happens when the heroes we trust turn out to be just as human as the rest of us? Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.